so much. Here we go on to the next session. So is Dr. Joseph Bell there? Joseph Bell?
Yes, that's me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear. So this session is for you. So may I welcome you to the session, and please take over the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, firstly, thank you all for joining us today. Our panel's topic is Narratives of Epidemics, Topsy-turvy Conditions of Humans and Quest for Existence. It's a research conducted by 3 faculty members of Bisha University of Saudi Arabia. It investigates an area of literature that has come to light recently. So they are going to discuss what they call epidemic fiction from perspectives that interrogate the human conditions during such times. So I'm the moderator, I'm Dr. Joseph Bell, I'm an assistant professor of English at Bisha University. The principal investigator is Dr. Abdel-Fattah. He is the chairman of the English department. He teaches courses in literature and literary criticism. His main research interest is literary and critical theories, contemporary English literature, and theories of reading. First co-investigator is Dr. Mashhoor Abdu, who is an assistant professor as well, but is also an associate professor in Taiz University in Yemen. He teaches courses in literature and language at the University of Bisha. His main research interests are in English literature and comparative literature, as well as drama. And last but not least, the third panelist is Dr. Suhail Ahmad, who is an assistant professor. He teaches both language and literature courses and previously taught at Aligarh Muslim University in India. His main research thrust is modern English literature, post-colonial theory, and comparative literature. All right, so firstly, the introduction will show the aim and scope of the research, followed by a background that reviews some famous world literature on plagues and diseases, then a review of some previous studies on epidemic literature. Now, the paper will also present the method used in analyzing the selected novels. There follows an analysis of the 3 novels which the researchers selected for their work. Finally, they will present their main findings and summarize, and then hopefully we have some time for questions and answers. So, Dr. Abdel-Fattah, would you like to begin?
Thank you, Dr. Joseph. Thank you so much. And we're so happy to join in this conference presenting our paper. The scope and aim of our paper is that we are thinking that epidemics are not usual times in human history. They present a threat to human existence in a very special way. This threat is best expressed in fiction, because in fiction we have the individual narratives. This period of epidemic, they present times of social disorder, political unrest, economic problems for these communities, and we need a voice to express this one. For the scope of our paper, we have selected 3 different novels from different historical period. One from that express medieval period, early 20th century and late 20th century. However, all of them, they carry a contemporary touch because of their publication. So they are speaking about previous epidemics, but they are recently published. For example, we have the first novel, or we have a novel, the Plague in Sharma, which was published in 2016, and it is about the plague in London in 14th century, in 1561. We have the novel, This Time of Dying, and it was about the deadly flu of the early 20th century, 1980. And then we have the novel Ebola 76, which was published in 2012. It is about the Ebola outbreak, which was in 1970. What gathered all these novels and all epidemic literature in general and fiction, this is the human reaction might be different on this moment. However, and I'm talking here from Mr. Riva's book, so they share a terrible fear and fear, the fear of death. And death is times be the end of one's life, and also it might be the end of separation. We are why we are selecting this, because if you look at the diagram here on the screen, when you read a historical book about plague or read a medical report about plague, these are texts written about it. But when you read fiction, you are reading plague written in a text. It is presented in a vivid way that you live the circumstances and you live the sufferings of people, and this is what differs, because here we have the individual narrative, which is missing in historical reports and medical reports. So we will move now to Dr. Suhail, and he's going to present us an overview of literature about plague and epidemics.
Thank you, Dr. Abdel-Fattah. Let's move on towards the area of overview of the literature. The first and the foremost work that grabs the eyeball is Boccaccio's Decameron. It presents the pictorial drop, the Black Death, in the 14th century that hits Florence in 1348. The remarkable thing about this work is that it reflects upon the attitude of the people, which was marked by the spirit of resignation, Epicureanism, and the celebration of the banalities of the life. People would pass their time idly by telling the gripping stories, listening to the music, eating the best quality food, as well as drinking the best quality wines too. Then we see the attitude of the people. It was purely selfish. Families and the friends abandoning each other. Mothers refused to nurse their own children. People who had been much loved and respected died without tears shed for them. Even we find out the priests or the pallbearers decamped as soon as they were able to flop the bodies into the nearest open hole. Then we move on to the next work, that is the Pardon's Tale by Chaucer. It highlights the moral degeneration as well as the corruption in the churches. The remarkable thing was that in the post-Black period, people had been so much upset that most of them had been quite confident that their is very so near. As a result, they wanted to get rid of their sins before they died. That is where our dear friend, the partner, comes in. He probably boasts that they refuses to sell indulgences to any sinner except the good one. In practice, he motivates the people to donate generously by using the saying, greed is the root of all evil. Ironically, he passes a very luxurious life himself. Then we move on to the next work, that is the Thomas Dicker's The Wonderful Year. It recounts the horror of the plague epidemic in 1603, both in London and the surrounding countryside. Dicker gives the image of the plague as a tyrant in order to personally blame it for thousands of deaths. The very important point about this work is that it provides the clue to the advancement of the medical science, adoption of the sanitary measures, and usage of the herbal plants for the treatment as well. Then we move on the fourth one, that is the Defoe's Journal of the Plague Year. It is about the summer of 1665 onwards. This work is brick between the history and the fiction. It shows the mass hysteria during the plague, and then we'll find out the features like the rich, including the royal court, close their houses and flee. Even the merchants, they're trying to find sanctuary on the ships marooned on the Thames. The poor have nowhere to go. Even the astrologians, superstitious tribe, useless prophylactics, and the quack cures had their heydays during this period. Then we move on to the next slide, and then we find out the modern dealing of the themes of the pandemics. The first and the foremost that strikes us is the Mary Shelley's The Last Man. This is the work. Basically, it is an apocalyptic dystopian science fiction. The book describes the future Earth at the time late 21st century, ravaged by an unknown pandemic which quickly sweeps across the world. Then we move on to the next book by the Jack London. It is The Scarlet Plague. It is a post-apocalyptic fiction novel. The story takes in 2073, 6 days after an uncontrollable epidemic. The Red Death has depopulated the planet. The work shows the massive scale of epidemics, dependence upon the medical science, only to be fooled by it later. The positive role the media plays even during this time. Then we move on to our next work, that is by Albert Camus' The Plague. Novel presents a snapshot of life in Iran as seen through the author's distinctive, absurdist point of view. It shows how the death, despair, sickness has taken control of the city. The novel exploits the human sentiments such as denial, anger, bargaining, and even acceptance. The work shows at the end how human beings disappointment in finding out the meanings in lives. Then we move on to the next book, that is the Ragdoll Plagues. The main theme that he exploits in this work is...
Sorry, Dr. Suhail, can I interrupt you? We're running a little bit short of time. Dr. Mashhoor, can you take over, please?
All right. Yes, Dr. Mashhoor, please carry on.
Dr. Mashhoor, the audio is off.
Thank you all. Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Joseph. Thank you, Dr. Fattah, and dear friends. So I'm going to talk about the previous studies done on this theme. So plague, Spanish flu, and many other diseases have been investigated to show the dynamic interaction among literature, science, religion in relation to mankind. Authors and researchers have adopted different approaches to plague literary texts, some of which focus on the memory, experience, and integration of people during the disease and at the aftermath, while others focus on scientific and religious perspectives associated with plague and mass disease. Some studied plague as a metaphor to undermine certain political and religious systems as well. As you see here in this diagram, the focus of the studies that research on this area, plague literature have dealt with metaphor, as we said earlier, dealt with the past and present, past texts to present also, present diseases, talked about the fashionable diseases, content and the form of plague text, and varieties of traumatic experiences during the plague epidemic, and behavioral responses of people, and some texts, of course, narrated autobiographical account during the plague metaphor. So in the next slide, we have famous researchers. Just there are many studies, but these are the most famous ones, and just as shown in the diagram, like Catherine married in 2006. She talked in her book about the Great Plague of London, again Patrick Rayleigh, Disease and Destiny in Plague Literature. Margaret Haley, she discussed the journal and of the plague, and she was just warning people to the wrath of God. She was talking about it from a religious point of view. Then Ernest B. Gellman discussed plague of the 17th century, select text, famous text at that time. Jennifer Cook in 2009, she discussed plague in literature, theory, and through the metaphor. Then Barbara and David Steele and Thomas Kay talked about or discussed ancient texts dealing with plague and how plague shapes literature and its impact on society. Ravika and Michael discussed human condition and the plague pandemic. So Catherine Belling, again, the trauma of the 1918 flu pandemic, that is the Spanish flu, and Dorel and David Davis, discussed the traumatic mass diseases and the human condition. And of course, our work is going to discuss this issue from a deterministic and existential approach, as it's to be discussed by Dr. Abdel-Fattah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mashhoor. The frame of analysis which we have been using in analyzing the novels that we are going to move now, we have been discussing from the deterministic view and the existentialist view. In brief, the deterministic view will say that people are not the determiner of their action, but they are the victim of very dangerous circumstances inflicted on them by nature, by religious powers, or whatever, and they are helpless in front of this. The existentialistic view, on the contrary, will view people as the determiner of their action, and whatever circumstances they are in, they try to inflict their free will. So they try to change these circumstances if they succeed, if they fail, however they try. Also, the existentialist view is very helpful because the idea of fear is very essential to this philosophical view, because under fear, people will change their attitudes, change their relationships. So the human condition is discussed from these dual view, deterministic and existentialist, as it will be clear from our analysis of the novel.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Fattah. And now we're going to look at some novels specifically. Dr. Mashhoor, would you like to introduce them?
Yeah, I'm going to introduce. We are going to discuss three different novels. I'm going to start with Ebola, 76 by the Sudanese writer Amir Taj Elsir. It was published in 2012. This novel deals with the outbreak of Ebola in 1976 in the Republic of Congo and South Sudan. It focuses on the spread of Ebola virus through Lois Noah, the central character. The novel depicts how people suffered and reacted to the deadly epidemic, which rendered them helpless. So the discussion focuses on several points. The first point is, concerns it's about helplessness and the state of indeterminism, as presented through Lois Noah, who is fated to visit Kinshasa in Congo and travels back contracting Ebola. So it's not Lois who freely chooses to be a victim, as the story recounts. So his fate to be there has caused tremendous loss to his nation afterwards, which is beyond his control and his free will. Next point is powers beyond human control and the plans of humans against them. So as seen, Ebola destructs human plans, as seen through Tina, Lois's wife, who plans for a renewed intimacy to have a baby, waiting for her husband after a long time. So, but Ebola has its own schemes to end her hopes, since its master plan is beyond her control. Her husband goes to the hospital because of the epidemic, and is in a very critical situation, and she dies soon after him. So determinism seems also to operate well on Lois's second life after recovering from the epidemic. Therefore, man appears to have no complete free will directing his course of life. The next point is the reaction of the people, of humans, to the epidemic varies, of course. We find that positive attitude in quest for survival presented through the poor and the middle class, who are actually concerned about their safety and survival. Several and other people react positively, helping each other and show resilience against the spread of Ebola and mass death. So the other point is hope, acceptance, and resignation of the people, and the resignation of the people to the fate is well depicted in front of the grim facts of burial sites and pictures, as you will see in the next slide. Pictures of their agony. So their sense of forgiveness is apparent when nobody blames Lois for what has happened, because they feel it is beyond their human control. The comics is also present through the factory workers who react with comic remarks on the spread of the epidemic to distract themselves from thinking about it, stating that this mysterious illness only affected monkeys, and then some of them they've gone to some offices and brought some banana peels from a worker's office to prove that their whisper is right. The last point is degeneration of moral sense and human values, also presented through James Ryak, a factory owner who turns everything to his own advantage and refuses to help others. And the other one is wealthy people values and their silly worries about the education of their children and clot of veins and their cholesterol levels in their bodies due to quarantine have been also tested well. So that's all for my discussion. Thank you. We move to Dr. Suhail. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Mashhoor. We are going to move on to our next novel, that is This Time of Dying by Reina James. This novel was written behind the background of the Spanish flu. In this novel, Reina James records This Time of Dying records to the historical account so far as the signs of the plague during the Spanish flu was concerned. However, she recreates an imaginative reconstruction of the ideas of the pain, trauma, and helplessness during the plague, as it conveys the deadly effect of the epidemic influenza on a small London community who strikes with vengeance. At the very onset of the novel, the undertaker Henry seems to alert the authorities about a letter that he found in the possession of a dying doctor who wished to warn the competent authorities about an impending plague. Authorities seem to ignore Dr. Thomas Bay's premonition of disaster that the world's body can hardly draw breath. There are no circumstances of peace in university quarantine that can afford even the slightest hope. As a result, social structure breaks down as the death toll mounts. Then we move on to the second point, that is the breakdown of the ecosystem. novel mirrors the breakdown of the ecosystem as the ordinary souls grapple with the practicalities of the day. Hospitals, cemetery, private lives, grocery shops, schools, all of them have been seriously affected. There was shortage of each class of the people involved in the funeral and burial processes. Pall bearers, grave diggers were falling sick. Carriage master and a store for the dead bodies were in short supply. When the report of the death of the students and the teachers like come from the school, it finally gets closed. Mad servant Lenny flees from the master's ailing house, creating a vacuum needed to do work. Once Dr. Tit falls ill, system of signing the death certificates even collapses. Then we find out the cemetery does not have the empty space for the burial, and there is a long queue of the hearses in front of the cemetery. Then we move on to the next point, that is the cremation. Even though the cremation had been in practice in England since 1985, the undertaker had been unable to persuade a single customer because the whole idea stood in the way. People saw it as a godless end with nothing left of you to be collected at the day of judgment. For fear of the accumulation of the bodies, now the undertaker comes up with the idea of mass cremation, since it takes no more than an hour to reduce a man to ashes. Plus, more than it also had the small amount of money that had to be paid for it in comparison to the burial. Let us move on to the third point, that is the Babal interpretation of the pandemics. Reverend Lucerne initially takes the orthodox views about the pandemic that God in his providence might well be offering man an antidote to the cruelties of the war. But in his private communion, he was disagreeing with the God as he observes paradox. Punishment deplorably was reserved for the guilty, but the good were paying heavily for the bad. Then we move on to the next slide, and we find out his popular. His statement was God absenting himself from the pestilence. He compares himself with the quack and all other means of treatment, but he feels sorry, but the God is not doing anything for it. That's it from this side. Over to Dr. Abdel-Fattah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Suhail. The third novel which we have taken for our research, it is The Plague Charmer, and it is by the English writer Deterministic, and it was published in 2016. This novel it discusses a very old plague, and it is actually not the same plague. It is the second plague of a plague that hit London in 1348. The events of the novel takes place in 1361, when the people of the village on the coast are a ruler, a seashore community. They got the news that the plague is spreading. So the first point we discuss in this novel, that memories of a plague. Here we have people who are accustomed to the plague. It is just 13 years away, so most of them they have experienced the plague. So when they got the news of the plague, they are not worried about what is the plague and what happens, but they are worried that it is going to reach the village and end. However, the news of the plague, we have another existentialist question in front of the village people. There is someone like a woman whom they rescue from the sea. She tells them that when plague comes, I can save you from the for a price, and this price is not silver or gold. My price is a human life. I have to sacrifice a human life for me, and I'm going to save all of you. Of course, this is a very important question set for the villagers. Communities might be accustomed to people who sacrifice themselves for others, but for the community to select a human life, or to select one of them as a scapegoat for all of them, it was a very difficult question. However, when the plague comes, this question or this price that was very difficult at the beginning, now when the time of the plague comes, seems very easy for them. Like, for example, the main character of the novel, Sarah, she sacrifices and she offers them as a sacrifice to save her children and to save the whole village. If we take it from the perspective of our analysis, in this novel we have three convergent and contrasting worldview. We have the religious worldview, that the plague is from God and He is punishing you because of your sin and because you don't obey His order. And we have another view. This is the view of the common villagers, and this view that seems like a naturalistic, deterministic view, because it seems that this plague came from the sea. The sea is taking revenge on them because of the things they are taking from the sea. Actually, the plague is the plague by two bodies of two babies. When they discover and want to treat them, they discover that these two kids had the plague, and the plague will spread on the whole village. The last point we are discussing it is about fear and the quest for life. When the plague started in the village of Sarah, the main character of the novel, the villagers decided to trap them inside their cottage. At the beginning, provided some food and water, but later they stopped and they were about to die of thirst and hunger. Because at the time of fear, when people are afraid for their existence, they can forget all their relationships and they can do whatever. This quotation is representative of this idea. Here, the manager of the village is telling Sarah's husband that if you remember, the last time we got that plague and people got stoned out of the village, the relatives of people who died, and some people over the cliffs, and some people were forced, people who were because the plague were forced to jump to their death. And this is the saying called if panic takes hold, there is no knowing what even decent folk will think. This is for our novel.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Abdel-Fattah. Dr. Mashhoor, would you like to conclude and summarize your findings?
Yeah. So as you see in the conclusion slide, these are the most important ideas. So an analysis, we have tried to do a kind of analysis of selected novels. This kind of analysis shows that the questions that usually underlie much of the traumatic events portrayed in their narrative pertain to human struggle to live throughout some outside life-ending forces, raising issues of destiny and free will, and leading to more questions about human relations, values, and beliefs. So the novels, though features historical events, predict the contemporary society with the resonance of apocalyptic images and preventive measures. They also show ontological shifts as the orthodox worldviews are jolted. Finally, they prove that the fictional community and personal narratives are not less important than historical records on health in an endless quest for existence. Thank you. That's all.
Suhail?
Right. My answer will go in response to Dr. Munir's question. The spontaneous fascination for the preventive measures during the time of pandemics, such as social distancing.
You wrap up give us a summary.
Yes, I'm just giving that one. So we find out all this concept that we just have right now, the quarantine and everything is already enshrined in the literature itself. Thomas Dacre's great work, The Wonderful Year, it talks about the quarantine and it talks about the social distancing. It talks about the isolation of the houses, 6 weeks periods also to be given for a house to recover. Even someone is seriously ill, so he has to mark himself on his cloth that he is ill, and he had a number of herbals like that. In his works, for example, This Time of Dying, it shows basically the human being's helplessness, and obviously without any regard for the medical science or so, they are trying to cope up with this, and as a result, they will survive. That is where the novel ends with optimistic note. That's it from myself.
All right, thank you. So we have a question from, another question from Dr. Rashid Mahmoud, asking about conspiracy theories. Could you find political, financial, or religious pseudo-theories or conspiracy theories in these works as we find these days? So, who would like to answer that? Gentlemen? Okay, Dr.
Okay, thanks for this very important question. Actually, in the novel I analyzed and the other novel, it's not there, but it is there that is speaking about the delay on the part of the authorities and their that they are just interested in saving themselves and their circles, their close circles, and they are not so interested in other people's minds. This is what we find. But the conspiracy, I think, is very much now spread in during the current epidemic or pandemic because of social media. This is why I think it finds its way. However, I think in the three novels there is no trace of such conspiracy that it has been inflicted on them by others. Especially if we like to, and the novel in German, he thought that this woman who came from the Sea Genevieve, she cursed the village, if you can interpret. This is a very interesting point you have raised here. We can interpret this from this point, that she brought this plague as a curse on that village in order to escape this price from them. And this is the answer from my side. My other please have mechanics repeat.
Okay, thank you, Dr.
And
Dr. Suhail, yes?
Yes, of course, when I did the literature review to answer this question by Dr. Rashid, one of the work that was the rag doll plagues by Al-Moghales, we find out the basic things like political othering, racial ostracization, social bracketing had been there. In this work, we find out the racial discrimination is there. The same black race people who had been infected with this so-called plague, so they have been isolated totally from the society. They are pushed to the margin. But the moment they come to know that they carry within their body the genes and of course the antibodies that they have developed, so they always carry these black people with them all the times, because in case they are going to fall ill, they will use the gene of these black race people. So this is one aspect. The second one is, of course, the capitalization. Of course, the capitalists are exploiting the situation greatly. So this was also there. People are exploiting in this work the ragdoll plagues. The money has to be spent only for the sake of one class of people. So that was it. So we do not find directly in our selected novels, but in our literature review, we have a couple of examples. And we don't want to comment on the contemporary world as such, be it political, social, or financial. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have time for any more questions?
I'm afraid that we are running out of time, so
Okay.
can we conclude?
Thank you for our.
So thank you so much, Dr. Joseph Bell and the entire panel members. So it was a very healthy and a very insightful discussion that we had. So can we move on to the next session?